Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Meetinghouse of Provincetown, where we affirm the inherent worth and dignity of every person, and where we support each other on our spiritual search for truth and meaning. My name is Rev Kate Wilkinson, and I am so glad that you have joined us this morning. Welcome to those of you in the room, and welcome also to those of you joining us via our live stream. And a warm welcome back to Deb and Bob from Canada. The pandemic has kept us apart, but now we're home. And also a warm welcome to my dear friend from seminary, Catherine, visiting from Kentucky. So happy to have you here. And happy Father's Day. Are there any fathers here today? Dads, please stand up so we can honor you. All you do. Today is also Juneteenth, which I'll be explaining a little bit later in today's service. What a full day. Before we begin our worship service, I have just a few announcements to share with you. On Saturday, July 2nd, the Social Action Committee and other Outer Cape peace activists invite you to stand out along Route 6 from the Rotary in Orleans all the way down to Provincetown in a pro-peace, anti-war action. Between 10 a.m. and noon, pick a safe spot anywhere along Route 6 and stand out with signs, drums, and anything you can think of to help raise awareness as visitors head onto the Cape for the 4th of July weekend. Help us to visualize a world of peace and justice. Also, on July 2nd is our next monthly Racial Justice Vigil from noon to 1 in front of Town Hall. We hope you can join. This afternoon, you are invited to come back for a ceremony and picnic out on our lawn. Crossing our fingers on that part of it. There will be speakers, music, and a cookout. A goodwill donation will be taken to help pay the musicians. If it's raining, the speaking part will be indoors, and then we're pretty sure it will clear in time for the cookout. And speaking of our lawn, we invite you to enjoy a cup of coffee or tea today after the service. The setup for Juneteenth will have already started out there. I don't know exactly what it looks like at the moment, but they have put up a tent for us, so even if it's raining, stick around for a cup of coffee. And finally, tomorrow morning, bright and early, I fly out to Portland, Oregon for UU Ministry Days and our denomination's General Assembly. Our board president, Will Hildreth, will be joining me out there, and we will be representing the UU Meetinghouse of Provincetown as your GA delegates. Yay. Thank you. We will do our best to make good choices. This does mean that we won't be having our usual breakout rooms during our midweek Zoom coffee hour this week or next week while Will and I are away, but we will be offering that space for folks to gather on Zoom and catch up and share joys and concerns in the main Zoom room at our regular time, Tuesday at 5. We just won't be separating you into the breakout rooms. While I'm away, please contact Kenneth in the office if you need anything. He will relay any messages to me that are urgent. Otherwise, I will see you when I get back. And now let's take a moment to affirm our community's covenant. I invite you to repeat each line after me. Love is the spirit of this meeting house.
Love is the spirit of this meeting house.
This is our great covenant.
This is our great covenant.
To dwell together in peace.
To dwell together in peace.
To seek the truth in love.
To seek the truth in love.
And to help one another.
And to help one another.
At this time, I invite Jen to light our chalice for us. And as we light our chalice here in the sanctuary, I invite those of you watching from home to light a candle wherever you are. In that way, we can feel connected even while we are apart.
Chalice Lighting by Oberlin UU Fellowship, Oberlin, Ohio. We light this chalice to find inner peace, love for each other, and faith in ourselves. Also to be welcoming to whomever we meet and kind to all living creatures. So gather around this light of hope as we share this time together.
Thank you. Please join me now in a spirit of meditation and prayer. If you have a joy or a sorrow on your heart this morning, you are welcome to light a silent candle during the prayer or at any time during the service at the table to the right of the pulpit. And there is a journal there to record your thoughts and prayers. Our prayer this morning is by Carolyn Winfrey Gillette. And you'll hear the words echoed in our musical offering later. Carolyn wrote these words to a familiar tune as a way of wrestling with the constant calls for thoughts and prayers as we face the tragedies of gun violence and other systemic issues in our society. If we just talk of thoughts and prayers and don't live out a faith that dares and don't take on the ways of death, our thoughts and prayers are a fleeting breath. If we just dream of what could be and don't build community and do not seek to change our ways, our dreams of change are false displays. If we just sing of doing good and don't walk through our neighborhood to learn its hope, to ease its pain, our talk of good is simply vain. God, may our prayers and dreams and songs lead to a faith that takes on wrongs, that works for peace and justice too. Then will our prayers bring joy to you. Amen. And blessed be.
The Darkness Divine by Reverend Dr. Kristen Harper, who recently offered a book reading here. God resides in depths of darkness, as in the light of sunbeams. The moon shines brighter, surrounded by night, and the life is secure in the black waters of the womb, as the night sky littered with stars demonstrates again and again, there's beauty in darkness and beauty in light. One no more brilliant than the other, one no more necessary than the other, one always complementing the other. Without the heated darkness of the universe, splitting neutrons, electrons, and protons from atoms, and life and light would never be. The task for us today is to recognize God in both, to see the divine in the rich brown earth and the textured black walnut, as well as the white snow and the pale pink jellyfish, to see the sacred in the panther and the swan, to embrace the dignity of the Black Madonna as it is embodied in the Virgin Mary. The task for us today is to look into the multifaceted colors of the onyx and see the miraculous spectrum of color produced in the prism of a diamond.
Thank you. Now is the time in our service where we take a collection for the ongoing support of this Meetinghouse and our shared ministry. As we enjoy a musical reflection, we welcome your donations here in the sanctuary or online through PayPal or Venmo. You can find that information on our website, uumh.org. On and off-site, your offerings will now be gratefully received.
If we just talk of thoughts and prayers and don't live out of faith and prayers and don't take on the ways of death, our thoughts and prayers are fleeting breath. If we just dream of what could be and do not build community and do not seek to change our ways, our dreams of change are false displays. If we just sing of doing good and don't walk through our neighborhood to learn its home, to ease its pain, our talk of good is simply vain. God, may our prayers and dreams and songs lead to a faith that takes on wrongs, that works for peace and justice too. Then will our prayers bring joy to you.
Thank you so much. The first year that I was working in Roxbury at the Unitarian Universalist Urban Ministry, people started getting excited toward the end of June. They were making their picnic plans. They were getting their kites ready. I had no idea what was going on. There seemed to be a holiday coming up that sounded really fun, but that I didn't know anything about. It's Juneteenth, they kept saying. It's Juneteenth. Oh, right, I said Juneteenth. I went back to my desk and Googled Juneteenth. How could there be this big thing that I didn't know anything about? Well, if you are not taught about something, you will not know about it. The problem is our educations have these gaping holes in them, especially in areas outside of white Eurocentric history, or that include history that might make us uncomfortable. There is a lot that gets left out, covered up, rewritten. And so sometimes we need to educate ourselves to find out about really big things that we were never taught about. Did you know that in 1921, the Greenwood district of Tulsa, Oklahoma, was one of the most prosperous African American communities in the United States? People of color in Greenwood lived an upper-class lifestyle. There were Black-owned banks, hotels, cafes, movie theaters, and beautiful homes, an amazing school system. It was a powerful community known as Black Wall Street. But that year, white people burned down 35 city blocks, destroying this thriving community and terrorizing its residents. 300 people died, 800 were injured, 9,000 became homeless. And this sort of thing happened over and over again in our country. But I never learned about it. Google Tulsa race riot. Portland, Oregon, where I am about to fly to, has been in the news for protests after the killing of George Floyd. But did you know that Oregon was founded as a racist white utopia? Black people literally were not allowed to live there. It was state law. Google Oregon's black exclusion laws. Did you know that 9 months before Rosa Parks decided not to give up her seat on a Montgomery bus, a 15-year-old black girl did the same thing? She was forced off the bus by police and put in jail. She challenged the law in court in the case that ultimately overturned bus segregation laws in Montgomery. But she did not become the face of the Montgomery bus boycott because she was young and soon became pregnant. And civil rights leaders felt that she was an inappropriate symbol for folks to rally around. Google Claudette Colvin. Did you know that those old black and white Western movies got the black and white part all wrong? They show the trailblazing, sharpshooting, horseback riding cowboys of the American West, but they are all white. In actuality, 1 in 4 American cowboys were black. The Lone Ranger was actually inspired by black cowboy and lawman Bass Reeves. Google black cowboys. There's more, of course, but that should get me started. So what did I learn about Juneteenth when I did the Google? It's a celebration of the end of slavery. Slavery was abolished on January 1st, 1863, with President Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation. But news did not reach Texas until June 19th, 2.5 years later. It was on June 19th, 1865, that slaves in Galveston, Texas were finally told by Major General Gordon Granger that slavery had ended and that they were free. The people of Texas are informed that in accordance with a proclamation from the executive of the United States, all slaves are free, he said. This involves an absolute equality of personal rights and rights of property between former masters and slaves. And the connection heretofore existing between them becomes that between employer and hired labor. This is the part of the proclamation that is read at Juneteenth celebrations all across the nation. Here's the part that is generally left out. The next lines. The freedmen are advised to remain quietly at their present homes and work for wages. They are informed that they will not be allowed to collect at military posts and that they will not be supported in idleness, either there or elsewhere. How to uphold the condescending white patriarchy even as you participate in acts of liberation. That's a sermon for another day. Later attempts to explain this 2.5-year delay in the receipt of this important news have yielded several versions of the story that have been handed down through the years. Often told is the story of a messenger who was murdered on his way to Texas with the news of freedom. Another is that the news was deliberately withheld by the enslavers to maintain the labor force on the plantations. And still another is that the federal troops actually waited for the slave owners to reap the benefit of one last cotton harvest before going to Texas to enforce emancipation. All of these versions could be true. What is definitely true is that slaves in Texas were finally told that they were free, and some great celebrations commenced. And as those free men and women moved on from Texas, they took that tradition of celebrating liberation on June 19th with them to California, to Kansas, to northern states, not to Oregon, as we have previously learned. Every year, African Americans gathered wherever they were to celebrate what became known as Juneteenth. Eventually, as they became landowners, land was donated and dedicated for these festivities. One of the earliest documented land purchases in the name of Juneteenth was organized by Reverend Jack Yates, who purchased Emancipation Park in Houston, Texas. In Maxia, the local Juneteenth organization purchased Booker T. Washington Park, which had become the Juneteenth celebration site in 1898. For decades, these annual celebrations flourished, growing continuously with each passing year. In Booker T. Washington Park, as many as 20,000 African Americans once attended. The Depression forced many people off of the farms and into the cities to find work. And in these urban environments, employers were less willing to grant a day off to celebrate this date. So unless June 19th fell on a weekend, there were very few participants available. The holiday was waning in the years leading up to the Civil Rights era. But an interesting course of events led to a resurgence in the celebrations. Remember the story that we've told several times here of Martin Luther King's Poor People's Campaign in 1968? It was King's dream that hundreds of thousands of people would march to the Capitol and camp out in Washington, D.C. until their demands were met. People of all colors and backgrounds uniting against economic inequality. But of course, King was killed. And although the group made it to Washington and set up camp on the Mall, pretty much everything that could go wrong did, including weeks of heavy rains that flooded the encampment. It was clear that it had to end. But how could the organizers leave with some sense of honor? It was late June, and there were people from all different states in that encampment for the summer. And someone from the Texas group said, "Why don't we have a Juneteenth celebration? It's a way to address poverty and freedom and harken back to our past. So they had a closing celebration, which was held on June 19th. And there was food and entertainers and speeches, and it was very memorable. And the delegates for the Poor People's Campaign took that idea of the celebration back to their respective communities, to Milwaukee and Minnesota. And those places began holding regular Juneteenth celebrations of their own. By the way, the 2022 Poor People's Campaign reassembled in Washington, D.C. this weekend. Many of my colleagues are there. Blessedly, they have better weather this time. In 1979, Texas became the first state to make Juneteenth an official holiday. Slowly, other states began to do the same. And on June 17, 2021, President Joe Biden signed the Juneteenth National Independence Day Act into law, establishing Juneteenth as a federal holiday. Just a reminder, banks and post offices will be closed tomorrow. If you were today years old when you learned what Juneteenth was, don't worry. Now you know. And I encourage you to do some more reading about it, and also to experience the joy of it for yourself. You are welcome to come to the Provincetown Juneteenth celebration today at 2 o'clock. All are welcome. We may have gotten there in different ways and at different times. Juneteenth organizer Reverend Ronald Myers told Time magazine. But you can't really celebrate freedom in America by just going with the 4th of July. On that day, we did not all become free. On June 19th, 1865, we did. So I am excited that we are hosting a Juneteenth celebration on our front lawn today. I'm beyond excited. And I hope that having a whole lot of people of color on our lawn doesn't make us feel like we have arrived at the beloved community Holy Land. Like we can check off woke on our list of things. Chris Crass, a longtime white anti-racist organizer and Unitarian Universalist, says, to become an anti-racist faith community, the key question for a white majority community is not how do we get people of color to join our faith community. It is instead, how can we make a prolonged, spiritually rooted, engaged commitment to uprooting white supremacy within our community and taking on collective action to challenge it in society. Our goal is not to have white people sit alongside a person of color so as to affirm that those white people aren't racist, he says. Our goal is to build and be part of beloved community, united to end structural oppression and unleash collective liberation. Our goal is for our faith communities to be spiritually alive, learning from and contributing to liberation cultures and legacies. Our goal is to join hands across divisions of racism in our faith and in our communities and affirm the humanity in each other. So even though I offer you that caution, I also want you to have fun. It's a celebration. Why should all justice work feel dreary and angry? Why is it so often motivated by guilt and shame? What if it was sometimes a joy? What if sometimes it brought us alive? What if it made us want to give more, learn more, share more, be more generous? In her book, Pleasure Activism, Adrienne Marie Brown writes, could we make justice and liberation the most pleasurable collective experiences we could have? We have to plan not just our events, but our meetings this way too, she reminds us. Does the agenda or space allow for aliveness, connection, and joy? Tony Cade Bambara taught artists and writers to make the revolution irresistible. Adrienne Marie Brown says that pleasure is a measure of freedom. When I am happy, she says, it is good for the world. She says we should learn ways we can increase the amount of feeling good time in our life and create more room for joy. She says we need people around us who can adapt, have a bright presence, who make us feel free, creative, and beautiful. We have been socialized to believe only scarcity exists, she says. Pleasure activists believe that by tapping into the potential goodness in each of us, we can generate justice and liberation. And I'm so excited that Adrienne Marie Brown will be offering a virtual workshop at our UU General Assembly next week. Definitely going to that one. Audre Lorde taught that caring for ourselves, especially if we are Black, brown, LGBTQ, or another marginalized identity, is not self-indulgence. It is self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare. We need to see Black people and white people having fun together so that we remember what we are fighting for. That there is a deep joy that will become possible when everyone is truly free. Now, don't get me wrong. This work, this play, this celebration has to center people of color. In the words of Rachel Cargill, anti-racism work is not self-improvement work for white people. It doesn't end when white people feel better about what they've done. It ends when Black people are staying alive and they have their liberation. So let's fight like hell for people of color to stay alive. And let's support our beleaguered school committees when they want to teach our children and grandchildren a fuller history. And when they want to teach a curriculum that supports diversity, equity, and inclusion. And let's slowly fill the holes of our own education by reading, watching, being curious, talking to people, listening, and believing. Let's make the revolution irresistible. Let this be our faith's call. And let our Juneteenth celebrations remind us what we are fighting for. Amen. And blessed be. It has become our practice to pose a question based on the theme of the service each week. It can be a topic of sharing out on the lawn today or with friends during the week. A reminder that we won't be doing our breakout discussions during our Zoom coffee hour this week, but think on this and share with friends and family. When did you first learn about Juneteenth? When did you first learn about Juneteenth? Thank you for joining us this morning. Thank you for joining us this morning. I'll end with these closing words. If we just sing of doing good and don't walk through our neighborhood to learn its hope and ease its pain, our talk of good is simply vain. God, may our prayers and dreams and songs lead to a faith that takes on wrongs, that works for peace and justice too. Then will our prayers bring joy to you. Go in peace.